hope that's the full. So this may not take the full hour. I want to thank everyone for being here today for this talk on food labels and ingredients. Once again, I will apologize now if the pups make too much noise and you can't hear something. But it's always the little ones on full guard. So just to give a quick little brief about me, my name's Carmita. I'm a 500-hour yoga instructor and wellness coach. So I'm certified in mainly Ayurvedic and vegan nutrition, but I have grown up in a household of fitness and wellness and just have a huge interest in just what we're putting in our bodies, what people are putting on their bodies and how it affects us either short or long term. So that's basically where the theme of today's talk comes from. So it will be a bit of a PowerPoint, but then also some discussion points. So let me get going here. And share. All right. Let me know if you can't hear me also, but internet seems to be working well today. All right. And if you have any other questions that are unrelated to this, like if you're someone who has an interest in yoga or in wellness and Ayurveda, or just natural lifestyle living, then please feel free to reach out to me also. So we'll jump right in with this talk in food labels. As I mentioned, I just have my own interest in what's being put in and on the body. A big part of that came into play was as I got older and I'd start grocery shopping. I used to just kind of buy whatever caught my eye, whatever looked interesting and what I grew up with. And as I got older, I really started wanting to learn, what's in these products, what's in the food that I'm putting in my body, especially being in that household. It was interesting because you can grow up in a household of fitness and wellness to a degree, but just so many different parts and pieces. So I started really diving into the foods and kind of learning about, even things they were putting on the food before it made it to the store, like different herbicides and pesticides and different chemicals, and things that I would just hear from friends who worked at restaurants and stores. So we'll primarily talk about like food labels, and we'll start with like the front labels, back labels, and some other things, and then we'll go from there. So diving into the front of pretty much almost predominantly a lot of popular food labels. On the front of a food label, you have the name of the product, you have what it is, maybe a short description and the brand. So the example I have here is Amy's. Amy's is a brand that makes a lot of natural and organic products, some vegetarian, some vegan. So this one is a lentil vegetable soup can. So it's very clean label, very like straight to the point on the front. And in the corner here, on the picture of the soup, then you can see that is a USDA organic label. So you'll notice if you go to a big market, like something like a Whole Foods or a Kroger or a Giant Eagle or Publix, like depending on where you're located, some of the larger companies have these labels on their food, but it's still important to read what's on the other side of that label. So a lot of the larger companies can afford to get these certifications that quickly let you know, hey, this is an organic product. Sometimes on the front labels, you'll also see it'll have, gluten-free, it'll have sugar-free, low sodium, and things like that in a big picture. So that can be helpful when you're out shopping and you're looking for products that fit your diet and lifestyle. Now, if you're going to more local markets, up in Ohio, we have what's called Lucky's. I've only seen Ohio, and then there's like one in Colorado, but Lucky's tends to carry a lot of more local, smaller brands. And so sometimes the local smaller brands cannot afford to get these labels put on the front. That's why it can also be important to look on the back of a food label, because then you can still read maybe in through the ingredients. The company may put on the back side, like, all organic ingredients, or a QR code to visit their website, and kind of see what's in their food products. And then when it comes to like expiration and sell by dates, that can vary. I've seen them on the front of some products, and I've also seen them on the back. Same for name and address of manufacturer. Sometimes they even put it on the side if it's a round label. So we'll jump into that. So this primarily looks at the nutritional facts. That's always a biggie on the backs of almost every food product, whether it's a box, a wrapper, a can, a jar, what have you. And it will have serving size information based on kind of the US standards, or whatever country that you're in standards. It will have calories per serving typically. And even the nutrients on the back is dedicated for what's in that one serving, primarily. So, and it puts it in percentages, it puts it in grams, milligrams. And what's interesting in doing my own research is how they choose what they put in these nutritional facts on the backs of labels. And really it's according to foods that maybe we consume a lot of, or nutrients that we gain a lot of, or that people have maybe generally get into over consuming, or maybe not consuming enough. So most foods have fats, sodiums, unless it's sodium free, or they use salts to preserve it, carbohydrates, which could also be defined as energy, and so fiber and sugars are also included in there, and then proteins, and some of the more common vitamins that people get from their food. And that's pretty much how they came up with what they're putting on the backs of food labels. Now, some products, if it's like a multi-product or something, it may have a double label, like here, the nutrition facts. It shows how many servings are per container, but it also shows calories and nutrients per the one serving, but also per container. You might see this when it's like a multi-pack. If there's different flavors of products, then it'll show all of the different serving nutrients and sizes and calories and whatnot for each flavor of something. Or a popular example I came across a lot of was for ice cream. Like if you buy like one of the smaller containers, like a pint, it may then put a serving size and the label information for the full pint, or just a serving from that pint of ice cream. So as I mentioned here again, labels will sometimes show information for one serving, or sometimes consuming the entire product. Food labels that are commonly consumed, maybe they should be limited or are known for being overly consumed, the carbs, fats, sugars, salts. And the ingredients in packaged foods and beverage items are listed separately and often below the nutritional facts label. So on some products, you may find that the nutrition or additional ingredients information may be on the side or around, or sometimes you can peel a label and open it to find the ingredients information. And this information lists each ingredient in the product by its common or usual name. And typically ingredients and products are in descending order by weight. So how much is in the product? So if the first thing in your food is, grain or corn or water, then if that's the most that's in that product, that will be first. Now the thing that's in the product the least is what's listed last. They say that descending order. So typically we see that seasonings can be listed last, because maybe you don't have a lot of salt in those products, and or sometimes preservatives are last in the ingredients label, because they don't have to add that much preservative to the food. So the ingredient that weighs the most listed first, the ingredient that weighs the least is listed last. So even though the back of what I show is just that nutritional information, typically most of us have seen, you know, on the backs of labels, it'll have more than just that nutritional information there. As I mentioned, sometimes you get also expiration dates or sell-by dates on the back. You can also get manufacturer information on the back. And some products even put little fun quotes or additional information about the vitamins or minerals that are in their products. I tend to see that a lot at the health food store. And some additional things you'll also see on the backs or fronts or sides of labels are some other labels. They may not look exactly like this that's on the screen, but just something similar or a symbol that means the same thing. So it may include, you know, products and ingredients, things that are not tested on animals. It may let you know that there's no food coloring or artificial colors or flavors in the product, that it's paraben free. We tend to see that in a lot of beauty products, that it's local, that there's natural ingredients, that it's pesticide free, that the can or box or label is recyclable, that it's GMO free, nitrate free, chemically, as you see, it goes on and on and on, our vegan and vegetarian products. And something that I wanted to note on these types of labels is sometimes now when it's a vegetarian or vegan product, it may put VA or VG for vegetarian and just a V with a circle around it for vegan. It also and might say that it's non-GMO or a non-GMO product or non-GMO product or project verified. So with that, it's kind of its own understanding when you are seeing and reading labels and it says that a product is non-GMO. It means that it is not genetically modified. It means that science has not done anything to the product to manipulate it in its own way. It also means that, you know, depending on the farm or where it comes from, and you can usually go to that company's website and find out, it might also list that it's using natural or organic ingredients. There can be a little bit of difference in non-GMO versus GMO. It just depends on the company. Labels do get a bit tricky. That's why it's always beneficial to go back and read the ingredients themselves and see what's in there. Typically, ingredients that are organic will have an asterisk by them. So that kind of lets you know, unless, of course, then it might be a product that has that label on the front that is signifying everything in this can is organic. But as I mentioned, it tends to be a lot of the larger companies are able to buy that kind of sticker, that label that says USDA organic. And so that's them abiding by the US standards. It might be different in another country. And so something to also look for is still reading the ingredients, because once again, there might be something like a guar gum or some kind of sugar or something that comes from a source that started off natural. Like they'll say, you know, it comes from corn or it comes from this plant, but it depending on how you look at your eating and your diet and your lifestyle, you might say that that's not or as organic as you would prefer. So it's just kind of understanding that. Like I tend to buy coconut milk that doesn't have guar gum in it. And that's debatable. Some people would say, well, guar gum can come from a plant, it can come from this. So it's coming from earth. So it's natural, it's organic, but other people might not agree. Same as tocopherols. Tocopherols come from vitamins. And so the same thing, that it's used as a natural preservative. And so depending on who you're talking to, they might say that that's natural and organic and okay, but other people might not want that in the diet. So it's just really that safety there to read the ingredients, even if the label says something on it, even if the label says it's USDA organic, even if the label says verified non-GMO or project non-GMO, because it can still differ. And so there's a lot of gray in these areas. Also, other food allergy warnings are things that you'll find on food labels. It'll say high in sugars or high in sodium, or it'll have little symbols like these up in the corner that will show like it contains, you know, fish or is made in the same facility as milk, soy, wheat, you know, same place facility that has, you know, or works with peanuts. Depending on where your food comes from, It may come from a garden or a farm that is strictly one type of food, but then when it goes to a processing center or it's transported, it may then have the possibility of coming into contact, depending on how the food is being transferred or moved to a facility before it gets to the store or on its way to the store. So it may come in contact with these other items. So it's always good to pay attention to labels that discuss this or show or have little labels that say, you know, even though this is a peanut-free product, it may be in the same facility as peanuts. This may be a dairy-free product, but it may have come in contact with dairy, other products themselves and milks and things due to how it's transitioned or moved from facility to store. And also how it's packaged. So just things to kind of keep aware of. And typically those are some things that you'll find on the back of a food label also, not always on the front. And so what about foods like a lot of our bananas, our apples, our lettuces, and things that have no labels? If you're going to a farmer's market, if you're going if you're growing something yourself, you know, how do you know if you're someone who's working with a diet or lifestyle? You want to know how many calories are in a banana. You want to know what's in this kiwi, what's in this orange. So there is a database for that. So a lot of us have apps. We can use our phone. We can Google things. I know some of my family members are part of Weight Watchers, and you can scan or you can type items into the Weight Watchers app and it will tell you, okay, medium banana is this many calories and it has this much nutrients, or, you know, this kiwi has this much nutrients or this much data, whatnot. But you could also Google and go to the website where it will give you more information about food that doesn't typically carry a label. You would just search the foods in the database and it will give you information on that food. So let's see if it has results for kiwi. I don't know, it might not work about it, but it has nothing for kiwi. So it's still loading. It's being a little slow, I guess, for my liking here. But so it would also then give you, oh, there you go, that information. So there you go. You can find all the information about foods that don't have labels in a food database or central. This one's by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but there are loads of them on the website. So, or on Google and the internet. So you could search just food database and they'll pop up. All right. And so I mentioned earlier, determining labels. So who sets the standard and why? Now we do have, and you may have heard about this, like the UN kind of has its overseeing of chemicals and foods and things that are distributed country to country. At this point in life, food can travel from the other side of the world into your local grocery store. So each country has its set standards. I will say, just by America, our standards are set differently than quite a lot of other countries and places around the world. So you may notice if you look up a list of like approved chemicals, ingredients, and foods in the US, that it can vary from like the UK, it can vary from Mexico, Canada, and whatnot. So, but for in discussion with just the US regulations, so the nutritional labels are overseen by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and was first mandated under the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act of 1990 to help consumers make quick, informed food choices. Now, this has undergone revisions, especially in the 2000s, 2016, and changes are generally based on updated scientific information and research, and also input from the public regarding ease of use. An example of this is when it came to GMOs, genetically modified food. People were very concerned about this. They were very interested in learning more about it. And so in the late 1990s, people wanted to know what is in this food. Give us more detail on this information. And so different laws went into effect so people could know and understand what GMO versus non-GMO was, what is the process there, how does scientific information and research kind of weigh in on that. And the FDA listened, and then more information, especially as we've gotten the internet and just nutritional books and just bringing our nutritional information into the light. People have been able to find information about GMOs versus non-GMOs, about conventional food, that's another term for genetically modified foods versus organic or natural. And even in natural foods, we have to watch, and still it's important to read the ingredients in the foods. So also for setting the standard and why, the FDA also then took into account, the calories, the serving size, and key nutrients that are on labels. This helps people informed decisions and to help with safety, health, and just general knowledge of what's being put in our bodies. So we tend to typically hear, oh, the daily 2,000 calorie diet. That's pretty much what the average human, the FDA says, should be consuming around daily to be kind of have that optimum nutrition. This can vary greatly on genetics, on height, on weight, and even just on lifestyle choices. Someone who's a bit more active or working out may be able to have more calories. Someone who is maybe dealing or has something going on with diabetes, they may be able to have the same amount of calories, but maybe have to watch their sugars. And then people who maybe don't work out, if you're not as active due to work or life or what have you, then you may even lessen your calories. So you have maybe less than the average calorie diet that we see on almost every label in the US, which is around that 2,000 calorie diet. That's also what those DV percentages are based off of. So I'll go back for a minute. So these quick guide to percentage daily values, these are based on that 2,000 calorie diet a day also. So if you're looking at what your daily value and percentages of your nutrients should be, like your carbs and sugars and things, that may vary a little bit. It may be less, it may be more based on your daily calorie intake. Let's just keep moving through. So we'll have a little bit more time for questions. I don't think I saw anything pop up. So awesome. All right. So also some other things playing with food labels. So this is something that kind of goes with government versus also marketing, based on companies and what they would like to see on food labels and how they come up with these labels and how then they kind of mesh or come into agreement with the government, with the FDA on what is put on their food labels. And sometimes if it's a local company, like we see this, as I mentioned, with smaller local companies, you might see like a funny quote or some additional nutritional information on labels of products. This can be fun. This can be a way to just show a creative kind of side of the company, and or it might just be a nice marketing tactic. So it can be nice to understand some directives, semi-directives, and redirectives. Basically, these are ways and that like labels are come up with. I kind of come up with for products. I see this a lot on beer, on alcoholic beverages, and a lot more adult products as we're going out there shopping. Kids products, they have a lot of guidelines, especially, when it comes to marketing or colors or things and labels of products that are made for young kids, even when it comes to toys and things and kind of beauty and health products. So they tend to keep those items clean. But as we get older, this can kind of come into consideration. So it can also be for a company, the considered initiative of a product or considered initiative of consumers. Labels can make it easier to understand the product at the point of purchase. Point of purchase can be when you're at the store going to pick up and buy the product. It can also help consumers to rank foods. Now, some different interesting things for a company to take into consideration is changes in consumers' food choices that are not yet observed or known. They may have a product and label that is out there and there's no studies in real life scenario if that label is helping the consumer to make a decision or not, and the possible impact on traditional food products. So more of the normal kind of breakfast things and some more of like just typical vegetables and things that are kind of not out of the norm. More like you might see something different with beer, coffee, cake, and kind of some of those more indulgent products. And aims can be to help consumers rank foods and more, what's more healthy, what's less healthy, and to help the food industry kind of reformulate packaged products Food labels also can be considered initiative by consumers. What's suitable for patients regarding specific low nutrient diets. Different issues there can be difficulty in finding threshold for some nutrients, or negative approaches are subject to wear out of fact. Basically, that means that semi-directive is when a company is looking at an initiative by consumers, or they're putting together labels for products that are specialty, the gluten-free, the sugar-free, the low sodium, and whatnot. But then, that can be so much for each person based on their diet. So it's really kind of a guessing game sometimes for companies to go, okay, we're going to put out this type of product, or we're going to put out this type of product and see if it sells, or we're going to put vegan on it versus, paraben free versus organic. So it's a lot of choices for the companies to make and what they'd like to include on their labels. And then the reducive or reductive are results achieved. So perceived as information by consumers. When a company puts out a product, and I do it too, I still go to the store sometimes and I see something and I'm like, wow, that label is really colorful. That's a fun piece of art on the product. Let me get that product. Let me purchase that product and try it out if it's within the guidelines of my diet and lifestyle. So that's kind of the results achieved here for the company, but it can require an interpretation effort. Sometimes there are still few studies. Sometimes it backfires, and even a cool label doesn't mean it's the best product that's being sold. Or sometimes it can be kind of information overload, where we're putting, vegan friendly, vegetarian friendly, gluten free, sodium free, all these things. And it can be a little bit overwhelming. And a person might be like, I don't even know if that food's going to taste good. And so they might not want it then there. But in all, it's to give information about food composition, to help consumers kind of insert food into daily diets, to help the marketing companies learn through kind of execution what interests consumers and what we, the consumers, are buying. And sometimes it can be also to warn consumers about certain nutrients that's in our food, and to give information about the food or products themselves. And all of this can go for beauty products also. Next month, I'm hosting a talk that's going to talk about the ins and outs of beauty and health and wellness products. So it's kind of these same things. What are the ingredients in our beauty products, in our soaps, in our foundations, and, tanning oils? How do these companies come up with these products and what they decide to put in them? And, what's there to look for? Sometimes it can be that in a food label or ingredients, the words look a little bit more complicated. Instead of making it easy to understand, like just saying lavender, maybe they use the scientific term, and that can throw people off, because not everyone wants to sit in a grocery store or beauty store and Google every single product. I've also have seen more companies starting to describe and define that too. So it'll say the scientific name of a product, and then next to it, it will put in plain English terms what that is. So if it's a flour, if it's an oil, or what have you, which is very helpful, because sometimes words and ingredients can look kind of crazy and they're not. It's just the fancy terminology that that company wanted to use. So some other things that are drivers, in labels and how they are come up with these labels through the FDA or through companies, and can be pushed and also encouraged and developed due to those of us who are making the purchases. So we're seeing more and more drivers of the rise in clean label production. We want to know what's in our food and keep it simple. We want to understand, the ingredients that are in our food and body products and keep it in plain English terms. We also want to know, what are health issues associated with certain ingredients and certain labels that are on, the products, even coming down to the cans or the plastics and things that our food comes in. What makes that plastic? What makes that can? So even if it's not an artificial food additive, what's the food safety? I see that a lot on products. It will have, in the state of California, this ingredient is not allowed. And so it makes me curious, what is the state of California not allowing in its, boxes, plastics, cardboards, and food, or, containers that carry our food that other states are. There also can be restraints here. Limitation and ability of clean ingredients to replace artificial ingredients, the high cost of clean ingredients, which just means keeping things organic and natural, A lot of people have seen that there are already rising food costs, but organic or natural and clean ingredients where there's not a lot of chemical or food additives or food coloring, it tends to cost more. And it's so wild that something from the earth that, most of the time can be grown or crafted from the earth, naturally and processed more naturally costs more, and that can be for so many variety of reasons. And so that's something that maybe we look into, because that price point often just comes back to us. If we want clean food, clean products, to replace those artificial ingredients, there might be a higher price point. So you may notice that in the ingredients, it might say, yellow number 7, red number 1, blue number 12. Those are non-clean ingredients, versus an organic food coloring or additive might be like carrots for coloring, fruit juice for coloring, blueberries for coloring. And so you can easily see those differences, and through the price and ingredients labels. Also, though, if people keep pressuring it, and as we go in and we're getting our labels and we're purchasing and supporting our natural food or our clean eating or whatever products that we enjoy to consume and have in our kitchens, then the development of whether it's natural ingredients with functional benefits or just whatever types of ingredients that we're into, we'll tend to see more of that in the stores. But you have to still go back full circle to reading ingredients, because just because a company can pay for a certain label doesn't mean that maybe identify or align with what you would call something that is GMO or non-GMO, that's organic or not organic. All right, keep going. I didn't see any questions, I don't think, pop up. I apologize if I didn't see something. I'll get to it at the end. And so this is going to full circle into a little bit of what we've talked about. So when we're talking about just the origin of our foods and prepared foods, keep in mind, this goes for plants, meats, fish, beans, dairies. So today, as I mentioned earlier, the food trade is a global market. It just depends on the size of the market, local versus global, and what their customers show interested in purchasing. So if you go to something where it's a Whole Foods, that is a global grocer. So Whole Foods in many, many countries was purchased by Amazon. So Amazon is a global entity. They are pretty much all over the world. So the products that they have can come from anywhere, and it's going to be based on who does their purchasing, the cost of food, the cost of products, what the consumer is interested in. So many things go into that. Versus for, like, as I mentioned, local stores may have more local food. They may have something that's, from the farm down the street, versus, in a Whole Foods or in what we have in Giant Eagle in the north. You may find that your oranges come from a different state. They may come from Florida. Now, that's great if you live in Florida, then you might also get oranges from Florida, or you may also get your oranges at your grocery store from California. So it just depends, once again. Or avocados. Avocados primarily come from Mexico. So most stores that have avocados, they're from Mexico. Now, lettuces, as I mentioned, can come from anywhere. An example, I go to a market, actually not in Cleveland, but in Columbus, Ohio, and they get their lettuce from Akron, Ohio, which is closer to Cleveland. But sometimes I see that in Cleveland stores also. And what can be interesting and fun and surprising too is sometimes the larger stores want to support local too, and they will purchase from local vendors also. And you can find a lot of that out on the labeled foods, or if you look up the company, you can see where your food comes from. As I mentioned, there's usually a website, a QR code, or just using a phone or internet to Google. If you write down the names of the companies, and you can see where that food's coming from. But what I found is my mother likes to shop at Walmart, and Walmart sometimes in our neighborhood does carry local products, which is great. And she found that out by just reading the labels on the front. So, and then on the back it said, like, in tiny little words, exactly where it was from. So these are things to kind of take into consideration. Also, a lot of our foods might not always come from a farm. They might come from, it's kind of, some people in the terminology would say it's a farm, but they call them factory farms. But Not every factory farm is what you may find on social media, which is typically in a negative. Some factory farms that grow lettuces and fruits and vegetables, that can still be known as a factory farm, but it's that these products are grown indoors using a lot of artificial light, other than, you know, farmers that maybe the food is grown still outside based on the time of year. Now, when it comes to livestock and fish, that's a whole nother story. I won't dive too deep into that, but it's just, you can find out a lot of the time by doing a little bit of research where that food comes from also. And so then this food comes from farms or factory farms or what have you, and it makes its transition into a processing facility or a holding cell. There are literally factories and businesses that are basically just made up of freezers and fridges, and they hold food for companies that then it transports to the stores. And that information is not always, generally not, put on a lot of our food labels information, but if you Google the company, you can kind of learn more about that information. So that can be what's important about reading the labels, taking time to Google or scan the QR codes to find out more. That especially happens for frozen prepackaged foods, even for brands like Amy's. Amy is a nationally known, she may even be a globally known organization. And so she sells frozen food and canned foods. Then these factories are kind of holding cells for that food. But then on the other end, you have prepared foods, which follow a similar structure, but can also then be prepared in store. And so if you're buying something that's in store, it may not have a label directly out there, but you can ask the sales rep or the cashier, whoever, or someone working at the food counter, what is in that food. I am seeing more and more at the local stores and local level, even, and actually even Whole Foods, I see do this. They will put the ingredients on the pre-packaged, on the pre-prepared foods, and it will say if it's organic, if it's vegan, if it's vegetarian. It will kind of full circle back to those little labels. It'll say, you know, gluten-free or non-GMO, or it'll have a VA or VE for vegetarian or V for vegan, or contains meat, dairy, what have you. And this one just kind of goes into, it's important to know where our food is coming from, especially food without labels, because there can be this disconnection between humans and their food. So it's important to take the time. It just starts reading label and, you know where the food is before it's sent to process facilities and factories. It's the importance of the origin of our foods. Now, this is going to full circle back to what I mentioned earlier with food labels and reading ingredient labels. The reasons, why do companies use additives, alternatives, and or human-made ingredients? This is something that we find in beauty products, but also in our foods. Sometimes we even find it in products we wouldn't think, like cleaning products, detergents, soaps, sometimes our furniture, paint. And it can be so interesting, like where color, where scent, candles, where things come from, and how that can affect us based on if it's natural versus synthetic. And basically, it's always that not everything's all bad and not everything's all good. Just because something's artificial doesn't mean it's terrible, but just because something's, organic, it doesn't mean that it's the best. It really just depends on, basically, it'll come down to how much you have or how much you're getting and whatnot, which I'll dive into in a moment. But I just want to give some different examples of some artificial ingredients that you may find versus some natural. So monosodium glutamate, which is something that, like MSG, but is something that will be a replacement sometimes for salt. Or if you're having like a broth or something, or a flavoring. And so a natural based sauce or something that you could use in place of that, or that you might see also is tomato, mushroom, or bones for bone broth. As I mentioned earlier, you might see artificial food coloring followed by the color and the numbers. Typically vegetables, fruits, and or like beets or juices can be natural substitutes for coloring. Sodium nitrate, once again, sodium, that is the key for salt. And sometimes it may just say sodium in the ingredient label, and that is salt. So, and then also we have gargum. Gargum is typically known to be a thickening agent. That's why you can find it also in detergents and soaps and paints and in products we wouldn't expect and that we're not necessarily even putting on our bodies, but that we use. And you may then find like a tapioca starch or potato starch is another one that they may use in place on the natural side of things, which if you jump down, you see that gum again. So any kind of gum that you see in ingredients labels like the XM gum, it's another thickening agent. High fructose corn syrup, cane sugar would be the natural side, artificial sweeteners. There's a load of them. And so you can use simple syrups, you can use brown sugars, you can use coconut sugar. There is a load of those on either side. So it's really just if you see something that you don't know, take a moment to read or Google it on the internet or write it down or what have you. So really in this, how I say it's not all bad or not all good. It's really that dosage matters. The dose, the amount matters. So as I mentioned, you know, when you're reading those food labels, the ingredient that is first is the largest amount in that product and then goes in descends to the last item being listed is the least amount in that product. So whether it's artificial or natural or organic or whatever your lifestyle is using, it just depends on how much. And so the issue with that, or something to question with that is, you know, when we're buying, especially prepared food, frozen foods, boxed foods, we don't really have control of what's already in that product. So if we're buying just kind of vegetables, fruits, or the seasonings themselves, we have more control over what's being put in the food. So we have more control over the dose. And so we're least likely also to have something artificial in that food if that's not what you're looking for in your product. Versus, you know, I still eat things sometimes that have a gum in them or that have some sort of something that maybe I don't want in my body all the time, but I do my best to limit it. So really it's just limiting, right? And there's always the saying, everything in small doses. And that's what's important to all degrees of indulgence. And then really, you know, you are what you eat. So whatever you're putting in your body, you know, it's about all of us wanting to do the best that we can. It's about knowing and understanding what we're putting in our bodies, whether it's the healthiest of healthiest organic apples, or maybe it's a slice of apple pie with whipped cream. It's just understanding and knowing and doing what we can to preserve and help our bodies to stay fit, stay young, stay healthy, however that looks for you. So we got, now this is my information. Depending on how you found this talk today, this is just kind of a tiny little piece of what can be to come in the conversation with this talk about food labels and ingredients. So if you have questions, you can go right to my website and you can reach out. You can go, I'm on Instagram way more than I probably should be, but answering questions. You can message me on Instagram at any time. I will get back to you, or you can email carmitasmiles@gmail.com and I am happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope that this makes sense. If something is confusing to you, feel free to also then reach out. And yeah, no, thank you for being here. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, you know, feel free to, let's see, you can ask, yeah, you all can unmute yourself if you want to. If you have a question or you're just curious about something, please feel free to share with the group. Otherwise, that is all I have for this particular talk. As I mentioned, we'll get more into the body and skincare products and the in and outs of that next month. I'll talk about more of like just kind of the uncommon plants and herbs that we may find in beauty products and how that's beneficial for the body, really. So yeah, if anyone has anything, feel free to share or you're free to go. I appreciate your time today.
I did have a quick question. I think you might have already mentioned it, but I just had a question about when you listed the artificial and natural ingredients, and I just want to make sure like they do have a different nutritional value when you're going to look at those ingredients, and like shopping at places like farmers markets, you have to factor this in, like that don't list all the nutritional values for some of the ingredients that they might list in their products, or don't have the equipment or the right resources to be able to list it for you.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful point. That's definitely something that can kind of differ when shopping local, or like you said, at a farmer's market versus shopping at a larger retailer. There's a way higher standard for a lot of these global level companies and larger manufacturers and producers of our food and products. And so to meet those standards, they definitely list a lot more information about what they're putting into their products. You may notice that, I'm sure, like sometimes you'll buy like from a local market, a brownie with, a cosmic brownie, which is typically a brownie with sprinkles on it. And they might not list, all of the food coloring that's being used in those sprinkles. So that's where it can be beneficial to just go back and ask questions if it's you personally shopping at the farmer's market. I love to drive my local farmer crazy at those markets and ask them like what's in the products. Sometimes I bring like a list of questions with me. Even when it comes down to like if they're selling candles, if they're selling coffee, where do they source their beans? Where do they ground the coffee? A lot of small businesses also do like a rent a kitchen or a kitchen share. So if you have an allergen, you might want to take that into consideration to asking and talking to them about, was this product also then made in a nut-free facility or soy-free facility? And if not, that's something that's good to know, because even though these kitchens have standards and they have to be certain cleanliness, you may still want to avoid that product just so that you don't have adverse effects. So yeah, that's definitely a beneficial point. Thank you for sharing that. Cool. Anyone else have anything on their minds or they'd like to share? Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. As I said, definitely stay connected, reach out at any time. And I hope to see you hopefully next month for the skincare talk. Thanks so much.